For this session, a very impressive panel of senior government leaders as well as civil society leaders who are going to explore the issue around how to bring access to information into reality, how you advance the right of access to information. We heard earlier today from Mr. Luxin Chipari that Africa lags behind in terms of adoption of access to information legislation. We heard from both Gilbert and Toby Mandel that of the 54 African countries, only 10 have adopted access to information laws. But the question I would like to ask is adoption of an access to information law necessarily the sole and sufficient action that can be taken in order to advance the right of access to information? Evidence that comes from African countries that have adopted access to information laws, such as South Africa and Uganda, shows that even when you've adopted the access to information legislation, you still need to do other things to make the right to information a reality. And we will hear a bit more in subsequent sessions about the experiences from South Africa and Uganda regarding what challenges they have met, what successes they have achieved in making this right a reality. So we have assembled this panel who are going to look at the issue from different perspectives, from the legal perspective, that is to say, crafting a law, adopting a law, implementing it. We're also going to hear from the panelists about other initiatives and other interventions that can be made, which are beyond the legal framework. And so we have in the panel Karlekar, we have Ambassador Peter Taylor from Sweden, we have Anjali Bajwat, who will be sharing with us experiences from India, we have Bruce Watton, who will be talking to us about the new initiative from being led by Brazil and the United States, the Open Government Partnership. We'll also hear from Temi O'Connor, who's one of the members of the drafting team for the African Union model law on access to information that you heard about earlier. And lastly, we'll hear from Sawad Hussain, who is with the World Bank. The World Bank has been a loyal and committed supporter of efforts towards promoting access to information and advancement of the right to information on the continent. What we wanted to do was to begin this session with input from President Jimmy Carter from the United States. We had hoped that a representative from the Carter Center will be here to introduce President Carter's input. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it. However, we are assured that the Carter Center, the Global Access to Information Initiative of the Carter Center, and President Carter himself are quite behind this conference happening in the next couple of days. They recognize that this conference follows from a regional conference that took place in Accra last year, wherein civil society organizations, government officials, many other stakeholders sat together to explore the challenges around advancement of the right to information on the continent, which culminated with the adoption of an African regional plan for advancement of access to information. And so it is their hope that the API, the declaration that will come out of API, will be based on some of the findings in terms of that conference that took place in Accra. I would like to ask our technical people to start rolling the video with President Carter's input. Thank you.
I'm pleased to greet you as you come together at the Pan-African Conference on access to information. As you may know, the Carter Center has been working globally to promote the right of access to information for more than 12 years. Like you, we see access to information as a fundamental right and necessary for the exercise of other rights, including controlling corruption, a clean environment, housing, and health care. Moreover, we believe that a lack of access to information disproportionately affects the poor, women, and other vulnerable and all sectors of society. In advancing the right, the Carter Center identified the need to address the political aspects, including the motivations of private and public actors to contribute to or to impede information regimes, and the constraints of competing priorities for scarce resources. To consider these issues, in 2008, we held the International Conference on the Right of Access to Information, which was followed in 2010 by the African Regional Conference held in Accra, Ghana. At the African Conference, there was a call for international bodies, states, and the regional community to establish, develop, and nurture the right of access to information on the African continent. This gathering is one such critical effort. As you deliberate on the challenges that face the passage of information of vibrant access to information regimes, you also have much to celebrate. Countries with recently promulgated access to information laws, such as Liberia and Nigeria. Stakeholder coalitions working together to present an African model law and best practices. And energized civil society fighting against backsliding in South Africa. And continued strong leadership as a special rapporteur for freedom of expression and access to information. Together, you have the opportunity to embrace the findings of past conferences and to continue along the path toward a universal right of access to information through the conference's African platform. As always, the Carter Center and I stand ready to assist and support your inspiring efforts. I wish you the best in this conference and look forward to hearing of its positive outcome.
Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Karlekar to come forward and make a presentation. Dr. Karlekar is with the Freedom House, and she's a senior researcher. I believe I don't have to introduce Freedom House to you all.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Guy and the organizers of the conference for giving me a platform to speak today. Guy had asked me to speak about sort of global and regional trends and try and put some of what was talked about in the previous session in a comparative perspective globally. So I'll make a few quick points because our panel is full of good speakers and I don't want to overrun my time. So first I just wanted to bring up two maps and look at the situation with regards to freedom of information and compare it to the general level of press freedom. So this is a comparison between Privacy International's Freedom of Information map and the most recent map of press freedom by Freedom House. So basically when you look at the correlations, broadly by region, we can see general correlations between the two. So for example, North America and Western Europe rank very well in both. South America and Asia are mixed, and we see the most gaps in Africa and particularly in the Middle East. However, there's not necessarily a definitive link between good practice with freedom of information and good practice with regard to the level of press freedom in the country. So we can definitely see that there are several countries which are outliers, which in fact have freedom of information laws, but which rank in our not free category in the Freedom House Index. Several of these include Mexico, Thailand, and Russia. Interestingly, several of those have major issues that restrict their level of press freedom, such as the killings of journalists, although they do have freedom of information legislation in place. On the other hand, we have countries like Mali in Africa, which actually ranks as the best ranked country in Africa in the Freedom House Index, but which has no freedom of information law. So, although I would say that in general there is some correlation between the two, it's not a completely 100% correlation. Looking at different regions now and how they compare on freedom of information, and this is using the scoring from the Freedom of Information question on the Press Freedom Index to our overall press freedom score. What we can see is that in both press freedom and freedom of information, the Middle East ranks the worst, followed by Sub-Saharan Africa. But the other regions also fall in broadly similar range. One of the main outliers is the former Soviet Union and Central and Eastern Europe, which performs better in terms of freedom of information than media freedom. You can see the other regions listed in order. This is the actual freedom of information question in the Press Freedom Index. I just wanted to put it up there so everyone could see what we look at. We actually revised our methodology in 2002, and when we did that, we decided to add a specific question on freedom of information as a way to focus on the issue and also potentially to be used as a tool for potential advocacy. In the question, we try and look at both law and practice, so we look at whether a law is in place, but also more importantly, if and how it is being implemented in practice. So these are some of the sub-questions we look at. I won't read through all of them. But definitely I know that there are many experts in the room on the issue, and if people have suggestions for how we can improve the wording or other issues we should be looking at as part of this question, I'm always welcome to suggestions. Turning next to some of the trends that we've seen in the scoring for this question over the last 5 years. Generally what we've seen is that countries experiencing a decline in freedom of information in the score on our index are also seeing declines in the general level of press freedom and an increase in official secrecy. So we have examples from Russia, where we've seen sort of general level of backsliding, as well as Thailand, where there was a coup, and those freedom of information, the scores for that question have declined. Sometimes we can also see declines based on a tightening or a focus on restrictions under the freedom of information law that may be in place. So this happened in the US, for example, after 9/11, where there were increased restrictions put on the right to access information. And luckily, many of those have been reversed since then. Conversely, we see that increases or improvements in the FOI score on our index are most often tied to the actual passage of an FOI law, and less commonly to improvements in implementation. But usually when we see changes in scores, because the country has actually passed a law. And this happened in Liberia last year, for example. Looking regionally, when we look at changes in the average score per region, we've seen very little movement on this question in the last 5 years in the Middle East and North Africa, as well as the former Soviet Union. And we have seen the most improvements in the Americas, Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. For example, in the Americas, Chile and Guatemala passed new FOI laws, which improved their scores. In South Asia, we had laws in Bangladesh and Nepal, and Liberia adopted the first FOI bill in West Africa in 2010, and that's been followed by several laws in 2011. So I would say that's a very positive trend. And finally, just a few sort of overall trends and themes. I think positively there has been a growing importance of FOI as an issue among donors, including multilateral organizations such as the World Bank, as well as a number of media development funders who are providing more funding for, sort of initiatives that are trying to focus on FOI, even at a country or regional level. One very interesting new development, which is not definitive yet, but which may happen, is that the Millennium Challenge Account, which is a U.S. government funding mechanism, focusing on low-income countries with good governance indicators. And so this is actually quite important for Africa because a number of African countries apply for funding under this mechanism. They are currently looking to establish a hard indicator for freedom of expression, which would incorporate freedom of information, adherence to freedom of information legislation or passage of it. This isn't a done deal yet, but it's something that the MCA is trying to push forward, and would basically mean that if a country scores badly on press freedom and or as part of that has no freedom of information legislation, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to get an aid package under the Millennium Challenge Account. So I think that's a very interesting new development, and it should come to pass or not come to pass within the next month or so. On the negative side, as some people have mentioned, passage of freedom of information laws just in themselves can take years and often requires a sustained campaign by local activists with international support. So we see the case of Brazil, which is still thinking about passing an FOI law after 8 years. We've seen a number of African countries, Liberia, 6 years it took to pass a law, and Nigeria, 10 plus years. So passage of a law in itself can be a hugely long and drawn-out process, even in countries where there is a sustained campaign underway. Also, as many people have mentioned, but I'll reiterate it, the passage of the law is definitely only the first step, and follow-up is really key. And that's why in our scoring we really try and take both into consideration, and to give credit for the passage of laws as the essential first step, but then also look very closely at implementation and use